You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
And we're continuing our coverage of the multiple fires which are burning across Southern California. By now, you probably know about the Pacific Palisades fire, which at last measurement had burned more than 2,900 acres. And I say cautiously that information is going to change in the near future because that number has been out there for the better part of 3 hours at this point. We know that it has changed. We know that there have been mandatory evacuations for all of Pacific Palisades, now also extending down south into Santa Monica. There have been evacuations at Hastings Ranch, which are just now being reported for the Eaton fire. And that also includes Altadena. All this information is coming in rather quickly. We know that the Pasadena Unified School District has closed all schools for tomorrow. And Tuwala Sharp, you may have heard last segment at the end of last hour detailing his ordeal trying to get to Altadena and get family to safety. He was talking about the power outages and how that creates a different problem of its own. Just in case you're unsure of what's going on, and let's say you have power to your phone, if you go to ladwp.com or SCE.com, if you're depending on whether your power is managed by Southern California Edison or LADWP, you can get information. LADWP, they're saying that any and all outages, the estimated response time is going to be 24 to 48 hours. That means you will be without power for days. And even though you may not be under a mandatory evacuation order, it would then be unsafe to remain in a home or area where you do not have power for days. Tawala was detailing how in a certain area there's a prospect of looting even beginning. So if you're going to be without power, and let's say your power company is LADWP, the estimated response time is going to be 24 to 48 hours. You can be without power for days. And we just had a brownout here at KFI. So this is impacting everyone everywhere. And if you go to SCE.com, they have an outage center, and you can check the outage status of your area or someone else's area. You can search by address or an outage number or a meter number, and you can find out to a very high level degree of how long there is going to be an outage or how widespread an outage is going to be. But I just want to reiterate, if you're LADWP, you can go to its website right now at ladwp.com. And if you are in an outage area, it's going to be 2 days or more before you will either get some sort of help, service, or power restored. Err on the side of caution and just be clear that your safety is more than about just the fire, whether it happens to be close or not. All of these things are connected, and all these things are important to be mindful of. And I'm so appreciative of Tuwala reminding us it's not just a fire. It's about the power outages. It's about the danger when you're driving, the street lights being out. It's about not being able to see the roads of what's going on. It's about the other idiots out there who don't care about your safety. This is a time where you really don't need to be out for anything. Just get where you need to be safe. Make sure your family members are safe. And then we will see what happens tomorrow. And I say that knowing that these winds are going to increase. In the next 2 hours, we're going to see the strongest winds of these Santa Ana winds around midnight. And whatever fires that we're dealing with right now, they're probably going to be considerably larger come midnight because the winds are just going to spread these embers just about everywhere. These are the things we have to be conscious of. These are the things that we have to be mindful of, even though you may not be directly in the path of one of these fires right now. Because of the winds, there's a degree of uncertainty as far as where the fire will go next. It will skip over into different cities and different municipalities. And whereas you may not be in a fire zone right now, you may be in 2 to 3 hours. Because when we came on the air tonight, we thought we were just going to be talking about the Pacific Palisades fire. And then 2 or 3 hours later, the whole night changed. And now, right now, the focus is on the growing Eaton/Altadena fire, which is, my word, growing out of control. It's already over 400 acres. We'll have an update on that, hopefully relatively soon. So just keep it right here on KFI. We will have all the information. I'm staying with you until midnight. And then at midnight, Tim Conway Jr. is going to come back and take over. KFI AM 640. We're still live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
As we continue to follow the fires which are burning in both Pacific Palisades and the Eaton Canyon fire, let's go over to KTLA and follow their coverage right now.
So I'll send it back to you guys.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
No, absolutely got to get out of there.
Get safe, get yourself to a better location, and we'll check back in with you, Carlos. It's a dynamic situation, obviously. We've been describing this throughout the day and into the night, and you see Exhibit A there of how quickly things can turn in any given situation, not just the winds, but other hazards as well that present themselves when neighborhoods go up in flames. It may have been a propane tank there that exploded. It looked like a series of them over the course of the last couple of minutes. Very, very dangerous. And if you're too close to something like that, it can spell big problems for you. So Carlos, we'll lose the shot and you guys get safe, and we'll check back in a bit.
Yeah. All right. Shut it down. And then we'll get back to you. This is the view from
all right. We'll come back to that in just a moment. They had just cut away from that. But it does remind me how, although we may be focused on the fires, there can be some unintended consequences of fires and other explosions and other flammable situations, which we could encounter because of the fires. It's not just a brush fire always that we have to consider during events just like these. And we're actually at the beginning of the story. We're not really at the end of it. These fires are still growing. When I say these fires, I'm talking about obviously Pacific Palisades and Eaton Canyon. The Eaton Canyon fire exploded to over 400 acres inside of an hour and a half, and it's still growing at a very high rate. We haven't received the updated numbers, but we do know it's growing at a very high rate. We are at the beginning of this story. We're not at the middle, and we're definitely not at the end. That's part of the reason why KFI has positioned this coverage to be wall-to-wall 24 hours as we want to bring you this latest information, which is going to be changing rather quickly. Last segment, we told you about the power outages and how you can get some of that updated information for wherever you are. That's something that everyone may have to deal with. Something I forgot to mention, Southern California Edison was also turning off the power in a lot of areas because of the winds and because of the fire. So you may not even be in a fire zone, but your power may be turned off. Those are the things we have to be mindful of.
In Altadena, they absolutely turned off the power because a lot of those trees in Altadena lining this beautiful city are super, super old. A lot of pine trees, a lot of needles that can just set off, a lot of trees that are rich in just tinder. These things will go up. If any of these embers from this Eaton Canyon fire, if the wind changes direction and blows the opposite direction, that fire is coming right next to where my neighborhood is just more and more and more and more. This is something to really, really, really pay attention to every single thing that Mo was saying, to all of the orders you may get, text messages, phone alerts. This is the time to pay close attention, because this is very, very serious right now.
Speaking of paying close attention, if we rewind a bit and we talk about what was happening earlier today with the Pacific Palisades fire, part of why so many people were caught in a compromised position is because they waited too long. They even were following the evacuation order, but they followed it too late. They were trying to drive out of Pacific Palisades. And if you know Pacific Palisades, it's like one way in, one way out. It's like sunset in or sunset out. That's just about it. I'm exaggerating, but not by much. And if you were trying to get out and you waited too long and you're trying to drive out of Pacific Palisades, you might have been one of the individuals who got caught up in that jam of traffic, and people just had to literally walk away from their cars. And unfortunately, when they walked away, they didn't leave their keys in it. Maybe they thought they were going to come back later, but they didn't leave their keys, meaning first responders had no way of moving the cars. And the only way that they could move the cars was by way of bulldozer.
Yeah, I want to take you here live right now. So this is Pacific Palisades. All of these cars were ditched. So all of the drivers panicked. They took their keys. This is Palisades Drive as well as Sunset Boulevard. This dozer is just moving these vehicles out of the way. So if this is your car, unfortunately, it's an emergency situation, and this is what they have to do. They are moving the cars as we speak. Unfortunately, there are dozens of cars. This looks like a movie set. Unfortunately, this is real. LA County Fire, they have to do what they have to do. They need to clear a path. So literally, they're moving the cars, the SUVs. We're seeing Mercedes, very nice vehicles, Teslas up here, but that's because the car owners, they took their keys and they just started running. They left the cars here as the firefighters were trying to clear the pathway, clear the roadway. This is an emergency situation where, they need to get up to the homes. They want to make sure people are not trapped up there. But this line of cars probably goes about 300 feet deep, at least as long as I can see from this bird's eye view. So we're kind of staying back. They're in a situation here where they are literally moving these vehicles out of the way. Yes, it is causing damage, as you can hear from the screeching noises, but that is what they have to do.
And here's something else which hopefully won't get lost in this. When you have first responders and other city services being devoted to moving cars or having to rescue people who stayed too long in an evacuation zone, those are resources which are not available for another emergency. Let's say all these resources, such as the bulldozer, which was set aside for Pacific Palisades, then you have fewer resources which are available for the Eaton fire. All these things are connected. And Alex Stone talked about some of this when he had his ABC report earlier today about people who were trapped.
We're talking winds potentially of 100 miles an hour, that this is about as severe as the winds we're ever going to see here in Southern California. This is about life safety right now. This is about getting engines in there, saving lives of those who have been trapped. We've been getting reports of people who are trapped in their homes and needing rescue, and firefighters having to go in. There was even an LAPD officer who was trapped, surrounded by fire, and they had to send in a rescue helicopter to look for that LAPD officer.
That's what happens when people do not adhere to the mandatory evacuations. You have to then use and utilize resources unnecessarily so. And I'm not saying that anyone's life is any more or less important than others. But when you overstay and you refuse to leave, and then you maybe need to be rescued, you have to send in first responders, and then you have first responders trying to save first responders as well as you. These are some of the things that we want to avoid.
This is a wind-driven wildfire. Typically, wind-driven wildfires are going to be very narrow. The LA Fire Department was telling us that they did have to make a number of rescues of mainly elderly people who were unable to get out on their own.
So keep that in mind. It's not just about you. It's about your fellow neighbor. It's about your first responder, all these people and all these resources which are being spread so very thin. The Eaton fire, if you're watching TV right now, it is out of control. It is just out of control. And know that the first responders for that Eaton fire probably were pulled for the Pacific Palisades fire and vice versa. We talked to LA County Supervisor Lindsay Horvath, who talked about how these resources had been allocated. And that was a couple hours ago before the Eaton fire became what it turned into. So it's even more of a serious conversation about how these resources are going to be used and how we in our decision making can impact them. We're going to continue to talk about this. It's KFI AM 640. We are live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app. We'll have more in just a moment.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
I'm Mo Kelly. I'll be with you until midnight, and then Tim Conway Jr. will come back. You might have said, well, wait a minute. Wasn't he on from 4 to 7 today? Yes, he was. He's going to come back to the studio at midnight and take over for me. Yes, he preceded me, and he'll actually take over for me at midnight. Tim Conway Jr. will be on from midnight to 3 a.m., and then he will hand it off to Neil Saavedra, who will be in from 3 a.m. to 5 a.m., and then Amy King will take over at 5 a.m.
Mo, we have new evacuation orders for Sylmar. They're being called new and immediate mandatory evacuation orders. That's for that fire that broke out north of LA and south of Santa Clarita near the 5 and the 210. That fire is now at 50 acres. And again, there are mandatory evacuations in that area now.
And if the past is prologue, we know that these fires, because of these winds especially, are spreading quickly. They are growing very quickly. These evacuation orders, you must follow them. If you are near the impacted area, you should assume that you also will be impacted and must follow these evacuation orders. We've seen what has happened with Pacific Palisades. We've seen what has happened in Eaton Canyon. If you are in the Sylmar area, do not wait. Evacuate now. That's the latest on that. And part of the reason why we're talking about this, I want to replay something for you right now. Earlier tonight, we had on a guest. Her name is Sue Cole. She is Pacific Palisades president of the community council. And she had to evacuate, and she took it upon herself to evacuate with her family. And I want you to hear my conversation with her earlier this evening and how today has gone for her. The Pacific Palisades fire, which has burned more than 2,900 acres and threatens 10,000 homes. Multiple homes have already been destroyed. And we're also watching this burgeoning fire in Eaton Canyon, which is right above Altadena. And as we talk about the Palisades fire, I wanted to bring someone on who has some firsthand experience with what is happening today. And coming on the show right now is Sue Cole, who is the president of the Pacific Palisades Community Council. Sue, how are you this evening, all things considered?
Hi. Well, it's definitely a difficult day and difficult night. My family evacuated early today, but in the past hour, we've learned that our block has burned. So our neighborhood, which is in the middle of the flats in the village, is on fire. I'm pretty sure we've lost our home. And there's so many different neighborhoods in the Palisades where people have lost their homes. And I just pray that everybody was able to get out, because access in and out of the Palisades is extraordinarily difficult. There's very few roads in and out just leading to Sunset, and then parts of Sunset and PCH were closed. So I was very grateful to get my family out early today. And I just pray for everybody there. It's our town is devastated from start to finish. Every neighborhood has been impacted.
What time did you receive the evacuation order, and then what time did you act upon it?
Well, I heard about evacuation orders being given for other areas up in the hills at about 10:30 this morning. So we closed our office, went home, and I just made the decision I wasn't going to wait for an evacuation order for our neighborhood. We packed up pets, medications, family photos. Unfortunately, no clothes. But we packed everybody up and left. And as we were driving out, I want to say it was probably about noon, I got word from our council person, Tracy Park, that our entire area, all of the Palisades, had been ordered to evacuate. So we didn't waste any time. You know, we just took time to grab a few things.
Was it relatively safe? I don't want to say easy, but was it manageable trying to evacuate via car, or did you have to abandon your car after a certain point?
Okay, the neighborhood I live in is a block away at Sunset Boulevard. So we were just able to get down to Sunset, head east on Sunset to the 405, and get out of town. The people who had to abandon their cars early on were coming from the Palisades Highlands, because there's one road up and one road down. So they were abandoning their cars and going on foot, trying to get down to the ocean. And unfortunately, some of them were driving on the wrong side of the street, which caused a major issue for the fire trucks trying to get up. So they had to bring in giant machinery to move cars out of the road to get up to the fire. And then the fire made its way all the way down Sunset Boulevard to PCH. So both Sunset and PCH were closed. And then the 10 freeway, was closed. And they had to close so many roads. So people had a hard time getting out. That's the biggest problem we have in the Palisades, is getting out.
Have you been able to contact any of your neighbors, or have you been able to find out their status? Now, you said that you feel that you might have lost all of your neighborhood, but have you been able to contact anyone?
Well, I don't know that all of the neighborhood went, because, usually there's houses that end up staying. But I've seen photographs of my block on fire, and I've heard from some of my neighbors that they've lost their homes. And certainly a lot of other neighborhoods. I have friends who live in all different neighborhoods of the Palisades, and I don't know about their individual homes, but I know homes in all of their neighborhoods are burning.
How long have you lived in the Palisades?
Over 30 years. And some of our schools are burning, our high school, our elementary school, all kinds of places are burning. It's just the most catastrophic thing that's happened in I don't even know how many years, because quite often it's just up in the hills. And in this case, it started in the hills and then came down. And now, from what I understand, a lot of people in Brentwood are being evacuated as well. Mandeville Canyon and all those areas in the hills in Brentwood. So and the winds are supposed to be staying in full force for at least another 24 hours. So that's it.
Ms. Cole, I'm not going to hold you much longer. You have far more important things to do than talk to me, but I think it's important that people hear your voice and hear your story. You were able to evacuate. You were able to evacuate your pets and other family members, but what is the first step that you're going to take after today?
I have to tell you, I haven't thought that far. I'm just grateful that we're all here and safe, and we won't be going back to the Palisades, obviously, until it's over, and I don't know what there will be to go back to, honestly.
Who is with you right now as far as family?
My husband, one of my 5 adult children, and our other kids live in other parts of the state and other parts of the country. And we've got our 3 dogs, so that's our closest family here.
But everyone is together and everyone is physically safe.
Yes.
Sue Cole, who is the president of the Pacific Palisades Community Council, thank you for obviously what you're doing for your neighbors in your neighborhood. And thank you for coming on and sharing your story. And also, in spite of all of what is going on, you are helping other people right now. That was my conversation with Sue Cole earlier this evening. And you could hear it in her voice. It hadn't quite set in that, as far as she was concerned, she probably would not have a house to go back to. She would not have a neighborhood to go back to. But I hope you heard early on, she said that she heard about an evacuation order. She didn't even hear it firsthand, but she followed the evacuation order and was able to save her family from what seems to be probably death, because if she's correct that she lost her home and her neighborhood, people probably would have died if they remained. So please respect the evacuation orders. We just heard from Eileen Gonzalez about a new evacuation order for the Sylmar area. You'll be hearing more about that in the coming news breaks. So keep it right here. We're going to stay with all this changing information. We started with the Palisades fire earlier today, this morning. And as we were getting ready to come on the air, when myself and Tuala Sharp came on the air at 7:00, we had just started hearing about the Eaton fire, and now we're hearing about the Sylmar fire. And there's some yet to be corroborated information about issues in Malibu and potential burn victims there. We're looking to corroborate that information. We'll give that to you. So
we actually got some information
go ahead,
on
then.
that. Apparently, there was not a fire at the restaurant, but several people that were walking towards the restaurant had to be treated for burns. There were multiple people.
In Malibu, correct?
In Malibu, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is the fluidity of a lot of this information which is coming in. We want to make sure that we verify it and corroborate it before we give it to you. We don't want to create undue panic. We want to make sure that the information we give is accurate. So keep it right here. We'll give you the accurate information. We'll give it to you just as soon as we have it. And we're going to make sure that everyone is in the best place, in the best position to remain safe.
You're listening to Later with Mo Kelly on demand from KFI AM 640.
I'm Mo Kelly. I'll be with you until midnight tonight as we continue our coverage of the multiple blazes which are burning right now, mostly out of control. I'm not trying to exaggerate. They are mostly out of control across Southern California, from the Pacific Palisades fire to the Eaton Canyon fire to now the Sylmar fire. And Eileen, did you say this Sylmar fire was 50 acres at this point? Is that accurate?
Yes, we're being told it's 50 acres right now. I'm going to check again and see if there are any updates on those. I'm constantly checking to see what the changes are.
That's all right. We know the Pacific Palisades fire is still listed at 2,900 acres. It's more than that. It's threatened some 10,000 homes. 30,000 people have been under mandatory evacuation orders. The Eaton fire has consumed more than 400 acres, and we have firsthand accounts of that growing almost exponentially. Tuala Sharp, producer for the show, had to leave the station to evacuate his own family and this was prior to the official evacuation order.
Yeah. Yes, because we received word that there were some evacuations coming down. Neighbors were already packing up and leaving, and you don't have to say anything else. It's like, got it, we're out. And when you get up there into Altadena and you can smell that, you can taste the smoke, you can taste the fire, and you see it on the horizon, it's enough to say, you know what, it's a good idea to pack some bags and just go.
Shannon Farron of Gary and Shannon, she had called in earlier this evening in detail as she was evacuating how she had lost power, how it was very dangerous on the freeways even then because of debris, because of the winds, which is not going to be any less in the coming hours. If you don't know, the winds are supposed to be at their strongest right around midnight. So if you happen to be on the roads in your attempt to get to somewhere safe, like I'll be leaving here hopefully sometime around midnight. So I'm speaking to myself as well. You have to be very mindful of the condition of the roads. You have to be very mindful of the fact that there are a number of areas that are without power. And when I say without power, that's including street lamps, that's including stoplights, that's including, you're dependent upon cars pretty much. And that makes it very dangerous. So you have to be very intentional where you're driving. If you can, stay off the roads for all sorts of good reasons. If you can, stay off the roads. If you have to get on the road, be intentional with where you're going. Get to a place where you are safe. Get your relatives to somewhere safe. Just in the past 4 hours in which I've been on the air, we've had 2 major fires start to grow. Go ahead, Eileen.
Okay, and we do have more information on Sylmar. That broke out just after 10. It's now at 100 acres.
It's doubled in the past half hour.
Exactly. And that fire has jumped the 514 freeway split per Angeles National Forest.
So to quickly recap, we have the Palisades fire, which is more than 2,900 acres. We have the Eaton fire, which is more than 400 acres. And I know that's grossly underestimated at this point. And we also have the Sylmar fire, which is more than 100 acres and growing quickly.
Exactly. That's what we have so far. So hopefully nothing else breaks out. As the wind picks up, it's supposed to get worse before it gets better. So keeping our fingers crossed that it doesn't get worse.
All we can do, and in the meantime, we'll give you information just in case it does get worse. Also, if you did not hear earlier, there is a mandatory evacuation order issued for northern Santa Monica. Residents living between San Vicente Boulevard and the city's northern border are being ordered to evacuate due to the Palisades fire. And residents north of Montana Avenue are being warned to prepare to leave. That was some hours ago. So let me just go ahead and say to you, go ahead and leave. Don't prepare to leave. At this point, you should have had plenty time to prepare, and you should be able to see the Palisades fire if you happen to be in the Santa Monica area. This is the time. If you haven't already, just go ahead and leave. If you have relatives in that area, be in contact with them. Find out their status. Make sure that they know what you know. They may not be listening to KFI. They may not know that there is an evacuation order for where they are where they happen to be right now. So make sure that your loved ones are taken care of. Let's say you have an elderly parent like I do. You have to make sure that they have all their medications or they can move at a moment's notice. They may need some extra time. So these are things that you have to plan for and prepare for in advance, because if it turns into a mandatory evacuation situation, you lose some control over how that happens. We've been playing the audio of people who were leaving and then got stranded and they had to leave on foot. That may not be an option for everyone. You have to plan in advance.
I'm just seeing reports after listening to your some of the things that y'all are reporting on, that there is a potential shutdown on the 5 due to one of these fires. I'm just trying to get some more details on this, but this is bad when the 5 freeway at Lancashire is being shut down, is the reports that are coming in.
And I was saying, yes, we have KFI traffic reports, but also let's use the technology which is available to us. If you're going to break open your Waze, you break open your Google Maps, it will let you know where a lot of these road closures are in a minute by minute basis. And then you can hopefully avoid going to a point where you're blocked in and you can't move forward and you don't want to be stranded on a freeway. So let's use the technology and this information which is available to all of us to make sure that we can remain safe. It's KFI AM 640. We're going to continue to give you the latest information on all the fires, from the Pacific Palisades fire to the Eaton fire to now the Sylmar fire. We're going to give it to you just as soon as we have it and make sure that you have it straight away. We're live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app.
Fires are raging. KFI News is working. Stay safe. Stay informed.